Culpa.co.uk and my lovely teaching assistant Jigsaw, who's been missing from the background of the videos recently, so I thought I'd say hi. And today we've got a lovely video for you guys all about creating effective settings, especially for narrative writing. Don't forget that you can find more content like this on my YouTube channel, do subscribe, and also over on my website, that's totally.co.uk. I do also run live group classes. You can see any upcoming classes on my events calendar. Plus, I've also got a writing course that's available now to purchase on my website. It took me 2 years to make, so I think it's quite good. So that's available to purchase if you like. The link is also in the description. Now, today, our big question is, what makes an effective setting? You know, what are Cambridge looking for? But not just what are Cambridge looking for, you know, maybe some of you guys are aspiring writers. Generally, in fiction writing, what makes a setting feel alive, feel real, and add something to the atmosphere of our story? Not just in the background, but actually be part of the story itself. And before we get into that, why care for Cambridge? And why does setting matter for Cambridge? Well, take a look at the mark scheme for content and structure. So up at the very top band, in level 6, what are they looking for? Well, they are looking for an effective setting that includes description, right? So if you don't have that effective setting, you can't get a high mark. In fact, one of the things that your examiner will often do is firstly, they will look to see if you've got setting and character. So have you got a named setting or a setting that's described? I could tell you, oh, this is a hospital, this is a beach, this is a football stadium. And have you got a character who is named? Or if not named, at least I know something about them, right? That's very basic level. If you have got character and setting, after that, I look to see, are they effective? Are they developed? Do they feel real? Do they add something to your story? And then after that, I look to see, have you got a climax? And is that effective? So really, character and setting, they are the building blocks of getting a good mark for narrative writing. They're not everything, but they are the foundation. And without them, it is really difficult, of course, to have an effective climax, because why would your climax be effective if I don't care about your character, you know? So how would you define setting in a story? I am talking mainly about setting, of course, for story writing, but everything that I say today will also often be relevant for descriptive writing too. So if you are someone that's very stubbornly decided, no, I'm definitely going to do descriptive writing, do stick around, because you will definitely be able to take something from today's lesson and apply that to your descriptions too. So go ahead and guys, have a think. How would you define setting in a story? What is setting? So setting refers to both when and where your story is set. So I need to know, is it set in the modern day, in the past, in the future? Where is it set? Literally where? Sometimes students don't tell me. You kind of set it in your hometown and assume that I know what your hometown is and where you are, but it's IGCSE, International GCSE, right? So you guys are all around the world. So you assume that I know that you are describing a town in Kenya, a town in Japan, a town in Malaysia. But how am I supposed to know? Literally, how am I supposed to know? So you need to tell me. And also, why always have it be your hometown? Lots of students, as I've said here, do set their stories in their hometown. But because it's so familiar to you, you kind of don't tell me anything about it. You assume that I know and you don't feel the need to tell me. So I do think sometimes it is quite nice for students to set their stories or set their descriptions in a place that is a little bit less familiar with them. It should still be somewhere that you know and maybe you've even travelled to, but it might make you more creative because you're not suddenly describing something everyday, ordinary and boring to yourself. So why not pick a more unique setting? Now, when you are describing your setting, you should consider the following things. When and where your story is set, as we've said. But also, what is the season? Is it winter, summer, autumn, or spring? And therefore, what is the weather like? Why not have your story happen during a storm, during a tsunami, during a drought, the driest summer on record, right? Really think about that weather and maybe even how it can influence your plot as well. Consider too, what is the atmosphere or mood that you are trying to create? Do you want to create a bleak, gothic, empty, eerie tone? Romantic, comfortable, nostalgic, hazy, rose-tinted days, right? Stop and think, how do I want my reader to feel? Therefore, where should I set it? Therefore, what should my weather be like? Therefore, what words am I going to use to create this atmosphere? Of course, you should use all 5 senses to make your setting feel alive. Lots of students are heavily relying on visual imagery, but don't forget there are 5 senses. So you've got your sight, your smell, your taste, your touch, and sound. I know, okay, taste can be a bit weird. You don't have to include taste if you don't want to, but definitely try to include more than just visual senses. I'm going to discuss this part next, but setting specific vocabulary is really important. You need to think, okay, well, if my story is set in Tokyo, if it is set in ancient Rome, if it is set in London, what would be the vocabulary that I would use to bring that place to life? E.g., if I was talking about London, I might do Tower Bridge, Big Ben, fish and chips, What are things that I would find mainly in London? What vocabulary words do I need to use? The final bit, and perhaps the hardest bit, is how does your setting impact your narrative? Right, a really good setting makes the story. The story happens because of the setting. The setting is dynamic. The setting is part of the plot. And that could be because it is happening during a tsunami. Or as you'll see in today's A-star example, perhaps it might be because a volcano is erupting. So do think about how that setting impacts the narrative. And it doesn't have to be as obvious as that. It could be that urban alienation, being in a big city and feeling completely by yourself and completely alienated. So think how setting impacts narrative and would impact your character. So a second ago, I spoke to you guys about setting specific vocabulary. This is something that you can prepare ahead, right? You can decide, I'm always going to set my story in ancient Rome. I'm always going to set my story in ancient Greece or in modern day Tokyo. And then when you get into the exam, you see what the prompts are and hurrah, okay, how would that apply to my pre-prepared setting? That's got the major advantage of then you've got a bunch of vocabulary and details, maybe even some descriptive sentences that you can reuse and that will make your story or your description seem more alive. So for your setting, think what vocabulary you need to bring that alive. So the first one is perhaps the most obvious one, which is famous landmarks. Might be famous buildings, famous rivers, famous roads or forests. Think in Germany, you might have the Black Forest, for example. Or if you were going to do Shanghai, you might have the Bund, right? So what are the things that you would see there? Food, right? Food is part of what makes a place feel real for me. So think about your location. What food would they have there? Would they have street vendors selling that food? I lived in China for a while, stinky tofu, right? Whenever you visit like old towns in China, you can always smell stinky tofu. Or in the summer in China, the smell of durian fruit. You might have outdoor cafes too, maybe French, European vibes there. Or you could literally have like little street vendors. If I'm in Shanghai selling xiaolongbao, like the soup dumplings. If you were going to be in Seoul, you might have maybe a grandma making kimchi outside the front door of her apartment and she's got her big metal bowl and mixing up all of the cabbage. So those small details can make something feel a lot more realistic. The sound of your place. If you are in a city, is it going to be loud, full of honking horns, the whiz of bicycles? I'm thinking Bangkok or Taiwan, right? Loads and loads of motorbikes everywhere that you go, nearly being run over all the time. Or is it going to be really, really quiet? Are you going to have music there? Lots of cities might have buskers or people playing music or music coming out of the shops or cafes or restaurants. And that can make that feel more realistic too. Moving on to that, likewise, is language. So you could also have the sound of language. If you've got like quite a multicultural city, perhaps one like London, you might have snippets of all different languages coming together, especially at tourist hotspots. You can also have street names. I remember in the story that I wrote, The Reunion, which I set in Paris, I named one of the streets Rue de Coeur, Heart Road, right? So you can include a little bit of foreign language there just to make it feel a bit more realistic. You can have very, very brief bits of dialogue in a foreign language. I'm talking here literally just like hellos, right? So you could have bonjour, guten tag, ni hao, right? So keep it brief because obviously it's an English language test. Or for example, in my French story, I said papa and mama instead of like daddy and mummy. That would be okay. So like maybe just a couple of individual words in that foreign language. In the A-star example I'll show you later on, she's also got some phrases in Latin, I think, or was it Italian? And that very much brings it alive. And do consider too your character names. I once had a story set in, I once had a story set in Germany and the character was called Martin Smith. Very British sounding name. So make sure that your character name matches the setting that you've picked. unless it is that they are deliberately an outsider, a foreigner, a traveller, right? And then maybe they do have a name that makes them stand out from the other characters. But it has to be deliberate. Think about the buildings. How would they look? Would there be cobblestone streets and pavements, shutters on the windows if it's a hot climate? The different types of corridors, the tiled roofs, maybe mosaic floors, or maybe it might be ultra modern and shiny, sleek and full of steel and metal and concrete. For the history too, you can think about, well, what would be there? E.g., if you were in Rome, you've still got the ancient ruins, right? So you've still got the Colosseum there. So you might want to think how that could interplay with your events. Any traditions, myths, or political events that could be going on in the background or could have influenced your character. One of my students right now is writing a story all about the Russian Revolution and Bloody Sunday. So he's very much been inspired by historical political events, and that's absolutely fine to do. Religion, are your characters going to be religious? Will they say prayers? Will there be temples? Have a think about that. Any symbols? Or in my, again, in the Russian Revolution one, the student included details about having an icon of the Tsar, like the Russian king. And like portraits of him all around in the corridors. That makes it feel really alive. Occupations. Do you think about what jobs people would have? Maybe bustling past you on the street. Would they be workers? Would they be craftsmen, maybe weaving something? Would they be market sellers? Would there be lots and lots of salarymen working 996 jobs, storming about in their suits? So have a think, because that creates an atmosphere for your story too. And anything that really shows the time period. So remember before I said, are you setting past, present, future? How does that interplay with your setting? What technology would be there? What vehicles, cars would be there? Any slang from that era? Be careful, that could come across a bit cheesy, so you don't want to do it too much. Or fashion. For example, if you were set in ancient Rome, they would be wearing tunics. If you were set in modern day China, everyone would be scanning QR codes with Alipay and WeChat, right? And rushing around on e-bikes. So you've got to think about not just when it's set, but where it's set, and how you're going to make that feel alive and realistic through your details, through your vocabulary. And as I've said, do remember this is absolutely something that you guys could prepare ahead, right? It's not cheating to do that. And in fact, it makes you come up with a slightly more creative idea because you're not so on the spot. You've already got your character, you've already got your setting, and now you're going to see the exam prompt and think, okay, how would my character in this setting react to this scenario that Cambridge have just given me? Then you can be more creative about the events because you're not trying so hard to also come up with an interesting character and setting. Now, the A-star story that we're going to have a look at today is set in ancient Rome. So that's around 200 AD. And the student has really tried to think about their subject-specific vocabulary, which I want you guys to pay close attention to as we read it. Some examples, right, of things that you could include if you were describing ancient Rome or if you had a narrative set in ancient Rome, right? So it works for both narrative and description. There might be a forum, a colosseum or an amphitheatre, a basilica, a public hall. There might be mosaic floors, bustling markets, smoky taverns, bathhouses filled with steam. The Tiber River famously runs through Rome, the Mediterranean sun, olive groves, honey cakes, figs, dates, grapes, right? So what are they eating? Tunic, which is a type of clothing. Jobs here, orators, those who give speeches, scribes, those who write. Slaves and senators, like politicians. What religion did they have? They worshipped their gods, of which there were numerous ones, like Jupiter, Juno, Mars, and Venus. And what might you hear? The rumble of chariots. So this is what I mean when I talk about setting specific vocabulary, and this will really bring your stories and your descriptions to life. All right, so now we are going to read an A-star story. This one I picked specifically because its setting is so good, but it has also got an interesting structure. So I'm going to ask you guys to pay attention to that too. The story is called Culpa by Kalli Y. And Kalli is one of my former and current tutees. She got an A-star for this and an A-star for First Language English. In my opinion, I think this is the best story that I've ever read, First Language English, for exam or for coursework of any student that I've ever taught or ever examined. So I think that you guys are in for a real treat. It's absolutely beautiful. Now, there's just one thing that you guys would probably need to know before we look at the story. Kalli was inspired by the eruption of Mount Vesuvius, a volcano at Pompeii. Right. So what you need to know is that Mount Vesuvius erupted around 79 CE. There was a sudden volcanic eruption and it buried Pompeii under ash. And of course, everyone pretty much died. The eruption lasted for 24 hours. Most residents were trapped and killed. Now, an interesting side effect of that is the people were basically preserved exactly how they were in their final moments. So you can see here an example of one of the statues. So the ash sealed the building, streets and bodies, and it preserved them, kept them just as they were in their final moments. Over time, excavations digging out revealed this kind of town that was frozen in time. They weren't actually statues, but basically the archaeologists could find like the gaps, fill them with plaster, and then produce statues from them. And they're really, really interesting because they show people's final moments, their final moments as they died, basically. So it's quite sad. Let me show you guys some pictures of that. Okay, so here are some pictures of the ash statues. So there's the one that I just showed you. So you see this person here lying down. I wonder if they knew. Seems like probably some of them knew. Maybe some was sleeping and didn't even know that they were going to die that day. That is not a genuine statue preserved at Pompeii. This one's quite sad, really. Looks like he's trying to climb away. I did read that their deaths would be basically instantaneous, so they wouldn't have suffered for too long, just in case this is a bit horrific for you. But yeah, the story of Pompeii is what's inspired Kalli, and I think if you don't really understand Pompeii, you're not going to get her story. So there's a little bit of background. Okay, without further ado, let's have a look at Kalli's story. Mea culpa, which means my fault. I'm culpable. If you're culpable of something, it means you're responsible for it. So that's where that word comes from. Mea culpa. The men arrive without warning. They are peculiar looking creatures, these sudden strangers, clad neither in tunic nor armour, but a clinging fabric, smoother than creased linen and tougher than soft wool, wielding a gleaming cylinder-shaped contraption with a wiry serpentine tail. They battle the earth with thunderous surges of air, as if they have bound Aelius, god of winds, to their will. All the while they speak melodically, like in song, but the speech is incomprehensible. Perhaps they have seen him, Eupalia thinks. Perhaps I will find him. If you don't understand what's going on so far, that's fine. You're not supposed to. It's a mystery. Who are these men? The men arrive without warning. The men who are peculiar-looking creatures. They are not wearing a tunic. Or armour, which of course is what ancient Romans would have worn. So already we've got our setting-specific vocabulary. But they're wearing smooth fabric. They're holding a gleaming cylinder-shaped contraption. So something metallic, something cylindrical. And they are speaking melodically, but in a language that our narrator doesn't understand, which is interesting. We've also got some setting-specific vocabulary because we've got the mention of the god Aelius, god of the winds. So we've got here some like Roman mythology. So again, setting-specific. I'm just going to put those in bold. So tunic, armour and Aelius. Perhaps they have seen him, Eupalia thinks. Perhaps I will find him. We're wondering here who is the him and perhaps also who is Eupalia, and of course definitely who are the men. Let's carry on. She glides towards them on silent feet, drifting through the howling merchants in the bumbling forum and the she-wolves prowling outside the lupanar before reaching the foreigners. Have you seen my father? He came into town to buy me honey dates. If you see him, will you tell him to come home? She asks expectantly in Latin, then in Greek when they continue to ignore her. Eupalia frowns. She knows they are savages, but they look so unlike the barbaric Britons from the north, that's me. She'd seen fighting each other to death on Saturnalia, that she dared hope there was a chance they understood the common tongue. So she's speaking towards these foreigners who are ignoring her. Interesting. They're ignoring her and she's gliding towards them. That seems quite ghostly. So some interesting clues right here. She's gliding on silent feet. Now we've also got some setting-specific vocabulary again. So notice we are in ancient Rome, so Eupalia is talking about the forum, the lupanar. She's talking about honey dates, food related to it, and even the language she's asking in Latin and then in Greek. And the history that she would know, she's referring to the barbaric Britons in the north that she'd seen fighting on the Saturnalia. That is something that she would know. And what is the common tongue to Eupalia? Maybe these days we would say English, but of course the common tongue would be Latin to the Romans. Defeated, Eupalia starts to slip away into despair. I must find him, I must. Yet what if I don't? The thought sinks its claws into her chest, and suffocating panic grips her body. Tears prick her eyes, and she shakes her head violently, trying to clear the burning helplessness. Father would never have faltered like this. The urge is consuming, an unrelenting need to find him. It is possible he's just slow? After all, his limp means he moves slower than most. Yet Eupalia knows there is more. She needs to tell him, to save him, but from what? Montruso Vesuvio. The words cut through her haze like a blade. Eupalia freezes, her breath hitching in her throat. The first word she doesn't understand, but the second? The second is familiar, igniting something distant, a fragmented memory buried deep under layers of stone and ash. So just pause here again and have a look. So we've got some characterization. We've got Eupalia and we've got her problem. She can't find her father. No one will speak to her. No one seems to understand her. The main thing really though is where is her father, and we know that she's forgotten something. We've got some lovely little details about the father, like he's got the limp, and that he went to go and get her honey dates, which actually came up here, the detail of the honey dates. Now, we've also got some language use here. So see here earlier on, I said some brief phrases in the language of your setting can be quite effective. I would assume that this is Italian. Montruso Vesuvio. Can you figure out what that might be? Mont? Vesuvio? Clue? And we've also got a little bit of a hint here, a little bit of a clue, stone and ash, which of course is going to be relevant to our setting. One of the strange men exclaims again, his voice thick with horror and disbelief, as he stares at whatever he has found beneath the ground. Oh, Montruso Vesuvio. Pain rakes her brain, the words striking harder this time, and the ground begins to tremble. Raindrops are falling, warm and soothing against her skin. They linger like smoke. A few slip down her bare shoulders before Eupalia reaches out. Fingertips that touch lightly come back heavy, stained in shadow. She grasps too late. It is not rain, but ash. Falling ash. Everywhere Eupalia looks is a swirling torrent of death and blazing fire. People cry and shout, scrambling and jostling, frantically trying to find their families. Some fall to their knees, praying to the gods for help, but the heavens have long been smothered by darkness, and not one deity hears nor answers. Half the forum lies in ruins, priceless wares scattered against cracked cobblestones. Where their owners are, Eupalia does not know. She does not even dare to think of the fate of the she-wolves within their weak-walled wolf den. Venus Pompania, spare me! An old woman wails, her voice hoarse with terror. Eupalia turns instinctively, but the speaker is lost in chaos, swept away by the many faceless figures fleeing through the ash-choked streets. They are running towards the Stabai, she realizes. But whether they will be safe there is uncertain. The wrath of the mountain is all-consuming. Pause here again, look at the setting. So the setting is directly affecting the plot. We've got this atmosphere of apocalypse, complete and utter destruction. So it's very much influencing our plot. So at first, Eupalia thinks it is raindrops. They are lingering like smoke, a little bit of a clue here. And she realizes when her fingers come back heavy and stained in shadow that it is not rain, but falling ash. So a really lovely description of the weather / setting, the volcanic eruption. Really nice description of the volcanic eruption itself, death and blazing fire. But we still feel like we're in ancient Rome. Some people are praying to the gods, right? Multiple gods, which in like Christian terms, you would only have one, right? So it seems a little bit strange. We've got plural gods, but we know that's because we're in ancient Rome. And the fact that the people are religious, they are praying to the deities, praying to the gods for help. Even in this moment, Kalli is taking the opportunity to include some more specific setting vocabulary, like the forum again, like the priceless wares people have been selling, perhaps pottery here, like the cobblestone streets, like the she-wolves in their den, and once again Venus Pompania. So she's still using Latin language here. Carrying on, she's also got some more landmarks like the Stabai right here. So she's really not just having like description and atmosphere of the volcanic eruption, but it feels specifically like Mount Vesuvius is exploding in Rome, right? So it's very, very much linked to that specific setting. Let's carry on. It gets very good here. So I think I'm going to stop talking as much so you guys can enjoy the climax because it's just so good. Suddenly, Eupalia glimpses him. For a moment, time stands still. Amidst all the chaos is her father, an impossibly tiny, frail statue against raging Vesuvius. White hair now dulled grey by dust and ash. His walking stick, a necessity ever since the accident that took Eupalia's mother, is gone. Instead, in trembling hands, he clutches a small bag of honey dates. The cry has barely left her lips and she is already running for him, away from the masses, away from the stabi, away from any hope of safety. She'll never reach him. He's too far away, but he senses her presence anyway. Blue meets blue as they lock eyes. Eupalia's breath catches as she sees her regret mirrored in that achingly familiar gaze. He knows she won't reach him either. His lips part, whispering words she cannot hear but knows all the same. I love you. Eupalia's heart twists, tears streaming down her cheeks. Her breaths come in sharp, ragged gasps, each one harder than the last, as the acrid scent of ash threatens to strangle her. Everything burns. Father, she manages to choke out between agonizing sobs. I love you. Venus falls. Marble glimmers, gilded wings aflame. For a heartbeat, Eupalia wonders if their patron goddess has descended to save them. She tries to forget the hollow clang of stone meeting a bone. Scattered honey dates roll towards her. Eupalia never gets to finish that sentence. She could, but no one else would hear it. No. No, Eupalia howls, the word torn from her throat, raw and jagged. Give him back. Give him back. The stone crumbles to the ground. The world is spinning, her vision swimming through the veil of smoke and tears. My fault. This is all my fault. If he hadn't come to town to get my dates, we would have left by now. Her heart hurts. I didn't find him sooner. Her head hurts. I didn't find him. Breathing hurts. Didn't find him. Thinking hurts. Find him. When Vesuvius draws her into his embrace, doesn't even hurt. The men arrive 2,000 years later. Perhaps they have seen him, Eupalia thinks. Perhaps I will finally find him today. Did you figure out what the ending means? Or indeed now what the beginning means? So this is a very, very clever story. Let's take the structure of the story first and then return to setting. The start of the story, the men arrive without warning, peculiar-looking creatures, clad neither in tunic. They speak melodically like in song. They don't understand the common tongue and they ignore her. They are us. They are modern-day tourists going to visit Pompeii. Eupalia, as a narrator, she is a statue frozen in time. So of course they can't hear her. She's a statue. Of course they can't understand her. They can't hear her anyway, but they are speaking, it sounds like Italian. They are modern-day tourists. So the first part of the story up to about here. This first part of the story, that is all present day, modern day, Eupalia is a statue. She hears them say Montruso Vesuvio twice. After the second time, she has a flashback. This part here is all a flashback to the last moments before she died. So all the way down to here. This is a flashback. How did she get here? Then we go back to the present day. So look at this structure. Present day. Eupalia is a statue, frozen in her last moment, frozen in the moment that she dies, frozen in her regret and guilt of thinking that she is responsible for her father's death and trying to find him, but knowing that it's too late. She's asking for him, seems like perhaps some memory loss, and doesn't understand what has happened to her. The tourists trigger the memory by saying Montruso Vesuvio. We then get the flashback to Eupalia's last moments right before she dies. Seeing her father but knowing it's too late and knowing that they are going to die. And her final thoughts thinking, it's my fault, I didn't find him. Then we flash back to the present day and we suddenly realise, oh, the men arrived 2,000 years later. They're not aliens, they're not from the future, they are us. and we realise Eupalia is dead. Eupalia is a statue. Eupalia is like a ghost. So the narrative structure here is incredibly clever. It's why I love it so much. So if you were wondering what happened, that is what happened. Now look, even up until the end, the setting is there. The setting-specific vocabulary, the sense that we are in ancient Rome, in the Roman Empire, right before Mount Vesuvius erupts, right as we are inside this volcanic eruption. So there's plenty more that I could point out. I mean, the characterization is just absolutely beautiful too. Kalli's definitely done a very, very good job here. But yes, we've got some absolutely lovely description. Even down here, right? Venus falls, marble glimmers, right? Lots and lots of Roman statues were made out of marble. So even here, Kalli is very much keeping this idea of Rome through her story. She's not getting excited in her climax and forgetting and losing control. She's very much always setting is in Rome, even to the extent that Kalli is wondering about the patron goddess of Venus, if Venus is going to save them. There's also another detail that I really love, which you might have noticed, is the honey dates. I feel like this is done really effectively here to kind of hit you in the heart. Have a look here, honey dates. So we see the honey dates come up, I think, 3 or 4 times. So the father has come to town to buy Eupalia honey dates. When Eupalia finally sees him, he is holding the bag of honey dates he promised to buy her. As the volcano erupts, the honey dates roll on the floor towards Eupalia. And then finally she thinks, if I hadn't asked him to get the dates, we would have been safe. He wouldn't be dead. So the honey dates is this like really lovely symbol of also like this fatherly love and her guilt, whilst also being very much a Roman detail that Kalli has beautifully woven in here to hit the reader in the heart. So guys, this is one of my favourite stories. What do you guys think of it? I found it very, very impressive. I wonder if there's anything else that you spotted that I didn't point out that makes it so good, or perhaps if there's any advice that you would give to Kalli for her next story that she could improve, feel free to leave those ideas in the comments. Now, just to point out to you guys that fantastic structure again, you guys could definitely have a try of using this structure perhaps in your next narrative. So try like Kalli did. Start in the present moment, flashback. How did you get here? How did this present moment arrive? And then when you return to the present moment, because of the flashback, something new should be realised by your reader. Like in Kalli's, we realise, oh, Eupalia is a statue. Oh, the men aren't from the future, they are us. So because of that flashback, we now understand something different. And it makes us suddenly look back at the rest of the story and go, oh, that's what that meant. It's also quite effective because it is a circular structure too, starting and ending in the same place. Remember, Cambridge really want to see that you are being deliberate and being clever with your structure, so why not try out this? Alright, so that's all that we've got time for today. Don't forget that you can find more stuff like this on my website, totally.co.uk. And if you guys would like to come study with me, check out my events calendar for upcoming lessons and group classes and masterclasses. And I have also got my writing course. Thank you all so much for joining me. I do hope that you enjoyed the story as much as I did. I'm wishing you all the best of luck with your studies. Like and subscribe. See you guys next time. Bye.